introduce our colleague, Tomasz. Adam Music. So I will, let's see, we have Thomas's bio. So good job. Well, let me introduce Tomasz. You know me, I'm David. Tomasz is chief scientist at MITRE, right? MITRE Clinical Insights and Innovation Cell, spearheaded multidisciplinary efforts in clinical and genomic data science for both private and public sectors. Former head of data science at Pfizer Innovation Research Lab, developing digital endpoints, designing decentralized clinical trials, and harnessing AI for clinical insights. Tomasz holds leadership and advisory roles in key healthcare informatics associations, including the American Medical Informatics Association and SNOMED International. Tomasz has contributed to the EPIC Research Data Network, enhancing clinical data utility. So, with no further ado, we will begin our panel discussion. I'd just like to pose a question first to John. Based on your experience, everything that you've seen, John, what was kind of your aha moment, if you will? What was the pivotal point when you looked at these emerging technologies, you looked at the data, you looked at what you were doing, and you said, this is really making a difference. This is really making an impact. What was that one time that you could share with us?
Sure, thanks. This isn't on, right? Right. I haven't known in life. Maybe I need to turn it. Is that on? Yeah. It was off. There you go. Well, thanks, David. So, I talked about like an investigative site health kind of program that we did. So back in Pfizer, this is probably, I don't know, one of their transformations, so it's probably 2010, 11, 12 out there. I had a group of 2,700 people, so it was all the country operations. And we were tasked to go from 2,700 to 400 in 1 year. So basically, the organization became, and Devon, you were there, so you were part of that organization and helping us drive some of the efficiencies there. But basically everything was negative. Everything was, I'm losing my job, my friends are losing their job, negative, 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 negative. So I sat there, I thought, what do I do when I get to 400? I'm just gonna have a group of negative people. And so we came up with this idea of how do we actually take on the work that we used to do, digitize it, and then help us inform where to go and what to look at. And so we built, and back then it was really cutting edge. Now it's kind of like, probably my phone does it. But we built some technologies that allowed us to really say, I don't need to worry about any of these clinical sites here. I need to worry about that one. And it was just based on 700 studies, 100,000 sites, and I don't know whatever number of patients. And it gave us learning algorithms that told us these people were outside the norm of 5 different parameters. And we then focused our energy on changing the culture and using the data science portion as our kind of differentiator in the company. And it really transformed the way that people thought. And they became a much more proactive, we had fun again, as opposed to, talking about the people that were moving. So that was probably the piece that was the most impactful for me, and it allowed me then to successfully implement something that then led to further implementations.
Okay. Thank you, John. Tomasz, same question.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I thought hard about it. Was there a singular moment, or is it more like an evolution? Maybe over the years you see the changes. And I think we're probably living through a moment like this now. That we're looking back, we'll see that those were actually some significant changes that were happening. Also, as an ex-Pfizer, I think a story that I had is I was lucky enough to be there during the pandemic. The sites shut down. We were working with digital endpoints, and suddenly, kind of what we were doing increased in prominency, increased in importance for the company, because we were able to enable some of those trials maybe to switch to a decentralized fashion. And actually we did run one large study using an app and a remote collection. Yeah, obviously there are some challenges there. There's always challenges, but I think that was an opportunity, maybe an inflection point for the industry to move to a different paradigm of running clinical trials. Now we know now, and John mentioned that in his talk, we're kind of moving back to the classical approaches now, and there's obvious reason for that. But at least we took that first step, and I think there are more opportunities on the horizon.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we hear that a lot. Wanting to go back to business as usual, but wanting to also keep that momentum going. That that kind of the silver lining in that cloud. Next, I'd like to move to more the ethical considerations. Patient data and a lot of the other ethical considerations of AI. We're not really talking, I know it's a big topic, we're not talking about artificial general intelligence or human level intelligence that's been debated out there with Sam Altman and these guys, but just more practical, pragmatic, what are some ethical considerations for AI with concern to decentralized clinical trials and patient data? Tomasz, maybe?
I can kick it off. So I think there was actually a recent study or a recent white paper from the American Medical Association talking about AI and clinical decision support and how it will impact clinical practice. So it has some indirect influence on clinical trials. And safety, kind of privacy of patient data grows increasingly important as we get those bigger and larger data sets. And models trained on them, especially, we've seen some examples of Gen AI, some of those chatbots leaking some of the training information that was used. So I think there has to be some, through maybe some regulatory constraints, there have to be some, regulatory requirements so that privacy of patients is preserved if we're using their data. For clinical trials, obviously, as a sponsor, we typically do not have access to identifiable information, so it's a little easier. But there's also a push in the industry to get data directly from the EHR. Some of the work we're involved in MITRE. And that obviously, that presents a challenge. Who's the honest broker? How do you create a firewall? So there's some interesting challenges. Thank you.
John, would you like to?
Yeah, I was going to mention the regulatory piece. I think putting some, I'm not a fan of a huge amount of regulation, but putting some controls around this, I think would be helpful because I think about patients, and especially when you get into elderly patients, technology is not necessarily their friend. My father, he's 90 years old and lives with us and was a cancer patient, and technology is his foe. So he can be easily, I don't want to say manipulated, but that's not the right term. Without the proper controls. So if we can have controls in place that allow for us to understand how that data is used and make sure it's used appropriately and in the right context, I think it'll help us keep pushing that in the direction of our need.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Maybe getting the doctors involved. We've been working for about 5 years to provide digital upskilling to doctors, like a 12-week program, so that doctors are now, suggesting, recommending, prescribing it during clinical trials. We're seeing, increased adherence, and of course, just like with scripts, with pharmaceuticals, on digital health technologies and in those clinical trials, that they'll listen to their patients, will listen to their doctors, and the doctors need to be able to speak intelligently about these technologies, and the patients need to have awareness as well to understand these technologies. So that's kind of bridging the gap between the doctor and patient. I'd like to move next to more the health equity. So we're talking a lot now about health equity. I attend a lot of conferences, I mentioned, but what I'm hearing at the conferences is, they've been talking about health equity for many, many years, diversity in clinical trials, topics like this, yet they come back year after year and nothing has changed. They pledge to implement something new, and nothing much really happens. what can we do to promote health equity? I'll, just throw that out, whoever wants to jump in. I know it's another big topic here.
I could throw some, start the discussion. I mentioned in my talk about the, free affordable clinic piece, and if you think of where the most, and this is US only, so apologies, but where the most underserved populations are, it's in that community. If I look at you could go 20 miles from where you live, and you might have areas of really disparate health application. And so if we could somehow get those clinics the right diagnostics, access to imaging, access to innovative therapeutics, funding and grants, federal granting monies, so that they can just improve the overall health of their population. You're going to see an increase in equity. So I think that's my community-based discussion earlier. So I think there's a real opportunity there. Going into clinical trials, I don't know, that's a different, yes, they should ultimately, but that's a different level. It's something that will emerge, but might take a few years.
That's a great point, John. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that right here in the U.S. we've got something like 40 million Americans, right, that live over 2 hours from a doctor. And I'm out there talking to people a lot. I'm hearing all different types of proposals, companies, trying to work through local firehouses or fire station. You may have a small town, it only has a fire station, only has an EMT, emergency medical technician on an ambulance, and then maybe their only healthcare that they have. So, right here in America, they're facing those challenges. Thomas?
I'd like
go ahead.
to build on the comment that there's probably a role for the government, federal government to help here. As you may not be aware, during the pandemic, actually there's been funding from the CDC through the ICAT program, increased access to community testing. And actually, the US government has sponsored targeted, very kind of surgically almost, underserved populations with access to testing, with free testing for COVID. That funding has, of course, been significantly shut down by now. But there is, there are epidemiologists, there are agencies that are, they have the mechanisms and tooling and know how to do that. The one challenge, I think, and maybe this is something I've drawn, when we talk about digital technologies, in a way, it kind of promotes unequitable access, because especially like a bring your own device setting, we have the usual divide between Android and iPhone users. Who do we target? How do we target kind of undigitized patients, right? But especially the elderly. Is there an opportunity?
I think that, so full transparency, I work for a company called Unveiled that's trying to approach this problem. And it's not focusing on the patient so much yet. It's focusing on the healthcare practitioner. The HCP at the Free Affordable Clinic actually has some level of access. They might not have EMR systems, but they clearly have enough technology to be able to be supported centrally. Now, then it becomes a manual process, like you said. But I do think it's a step in the right direction. Like you said, I don't think there's no one silver bullet, clearly. But somehow engaging that community will advance that equity discussion. Will it solve it? There's something back in there.
Wonderful discussion. I'd like to move on to kind of hear what you both are excited about with regard. Try to keep it focused on decentralized clinical trials if possible. What are you excited about coming up in the near, we'll say, in the near future, or that's emerging now?
I can go first. Did I turn? No. One thing I'm excited about is that the AI hype has replaced the blockchain hype. I don't know about you, but I could only hear about semantic web and blockchain for so long. And it's good that, we have a bit of a change. And I'm saying that full disclosure, I worked at Thomson Reuters, and it was a time where we were pushing hard knowledge graph solutions and all of that. And I feel like this is slowly, we're moving away from that. And AI has definitely eclipsed blockchain. So this is one very positive thing. I still think that, in terms of technologies, we tend to overestimate the kind of the short-term impact and underestimate the long-term, like it's a known law. And with digital technologies, I think we're seeing maybe, I don't know, we may disagree on this, maybe a peak of the hype with digital technologies. I remember there was a time, it was back at Pfizer, it's public knowledge, when Pfizer, in the middle of the pandemic, spent $100 million on acquiring a company based in Australia called Reza, which basically had an app who could potentially detect respiratory illness. $100 million, bit of change. Like try NRF. So I don't know what exactly happened with that acquisition, but I have not seen any follow-up. And I think maybe this is a positive thing. We peaked, and now we're going to that kind of the valley of disillusionment. But there's the light at the end of the tunnel where we could, maybe find real application. Because a lot of the times I feel like we had a solution in search of a problem. But maybe we can move past that and actually look at implementation.
Yeah, and I agree with what you said. I mean, I think it's a very good point. What excites me about this space, though, again, I'm an operations guy, so I'm a numbers guy. So, if you think of like a clinical trial, if you're running a $100 million clinical trial and you're using a CRO, you're probably spending about $50 million on the CRO professional fees. In there, you probably have 30% of that still site management. Site management is a person going and checking something, and going and following up on a question, or following up on a question that comes from the site. So there's a lot of like back and forth around information that I believe if that starts to be digitized, and generative AI can start prompting, that doesn't make any sense, or can say, go to your protocol section 4. That's the answer you're looking for. I think we can accelerate some of that time lag between the Q&A and reduce the overall costs of site management. I think there's a huge opportunity there. And when I made my comment about the Kodak moment, that's where I think, I was pushing this recently, some senior level CRO folks on this topic because stop selling the FTEs, start selling the innovation. Because that's what I want. I want to do that $100 million trial at $80 million, and then do four phase 1 trials of dose escalation, in oncology. Because that would be the money that would allow me to do that.
I agree, and it's a hype. Is it too much hype? I like the quote: "The greatest failure of humankind is not being able to conceive the idea of exponential growth." So we could be at this inflection point of exponential growth where maybe there should be more hype, but we want to keep it practical and pragmatic. So I think that's probably we'll err on the side of caution here with the hype curve. So let's just kind of finish up here with something let's say I think I want to put it. We're design thinking firms, so we have a number of Stanford design thinking, IDEO design thinking instructors, coaches on our team. So we use the I like and I wish. So I'd like to maybe finish up with I like, and I think we've kind of touched upon some of these. And I wish we could do this or that. So maybe John, would you like to begin?
Sure. I wish that the CROs would stop selling me individualized solutions. Combine, like if you have the data, come to me with the data, show me how you can get to a patient, and bundle it into one package, as opposed to upselling me on 40 different theoretical innovations. They have that capability now. I wish they would just start doing that.
And more end-to-end solutions about
integrate their own capabilities into my trial. Don't make me pay for it.
Oh, I see. Thomas?
I like there is some regulation coming out around AI. I wish also, there's FDA has published some things, there's some movement on digital technologies. There's ONC, I think just recently released a new rule for certification of the HR technology. There's some movement on that. I wish it was more coordinated, maybe, and that we had some clearer guidelines. Because to your point, I think we should probably tighten those things a little bit more, especially in the context of kind of international competition and kind of U.S. adversaries. I feel that we could be doing more. I think most recently Canada announced quite a significant investment in AI technologies, and we're not necessarily seeing that in the US. So I wish we had more.
Wonderful answer. I think we don't really know until, and that was kind of the latent potential. I like another guy here, local guy, Ray Kurzweil, the futurist. I think this was a few years ago. Said he sees a new breakthrough every 3 days, I think it was. It just kind of even makes him go, wow, this is a guy that spent his entire life, studying the future. And so I think when somebody like that says it, we need to pay attention, and the window of opportunity may be closing to do pilot. We're still doing pilots. We still want to, focus on the proper change management, get the quick wins, identify the influencers, advocates, and do the pilots. As John mentioned, this endpoint, and Thomas as well, we're applying at this endpoint and may change the workflow or the SOP, the IT governance. The window of opportunity may be closing where you need to implement at scale. We may see that day, I think, in my opinion, in the next few years. So I think we're about at our Q&A, audience Q&A time. How are we going to do? Are you going to, Fiona will bring the microphone around, or do we have, okay. So just, you're going to raise your hand, and Fiona will bring the microphone.
This is not a question from my side. It is to add to a panel discussion regarding the wish part of that. So when we think about decentralized clinical trial, we are at the effects of the cell therapy area. So we have to think about decentralized manufacturing also, because a lot of cell therapies you have to manufacture at different places to give the patient there. So that part is also there. So all these things, when you decentralize clinical trial and manufacturing, you include more and more variables. When more and more variables comes, when you collect the data, mainly the therapeutic outcome and the endpoints, it has to be collected in a uniform way. Then only you can use that data in a decentralized trial. So when we apply artificial intelligence, we have to make the provisions, uniform methods to collect the data. So that is the part mainly. Then only we can compare the data from different sites and different geographical regions. Then this has to be made at an early stage before and making a platform so that it will be health equity will be also, you can reduce the expenses if you can use this platform for multiple trials.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for your comment. If I understand correctly, you're saying to extend beyond to include in the initial design the manufacturing, kind of including all the way through to your kind of SCM, supply chain management, from initial stage. Everybody's involved. Is that how you understand? And anyone like to?
I think the only added nuance was cell therapy. So there's a special consideration.
And also, when you do the data collection, if you use the artificial intelligence and generative artificial intelligence, if there's a cloud platform, it can be done in a less expensive way.
Yeah, I'm reading some amazing things, kind of lab in the cloud and automated labs I'm seeing. It's just some fascinating things going on. Anyone else?
So John, you talked about you wish the CRO do not sell you FTE, sell you innovation. Actually, I used to be a venture capital which I've tagged for this solution, so it's one of the biggest CRO. So I'm just curious because the FTE model is a very mature model, and pharma companies are paying them based on FTE, I guess, right? I'm just curious, like how pharma companies will pay for innovation, or what are the models that you see in the market? Yeah. So
Okay. If I was to put on my prognostication hat and say what's going to happen in the future, which probably won't be wrong, I'm not so sure it's going to be the CROs that actually do that. I think it's going to be other companies that take the money away from them. Because if you look at where industry's going towards more FSP. And so they're going to have more control over the individual FTEs, so they can ramp them down a lot more quickly. If you then start having companies that provide AI solutions that can remove FTEs from that equation, FSP ramps down, the AI solution will be, I've seen 50% less on certain, line items in zero budgets. So I think that might be the pressure that drives CROs to do that by mandate. Because the problem is one of the last products that I worked on that got approved, it was $450,000 per patient vehicle. That is gigantic, and just so expensive. And we just use labor to do that. If I could use data to find those patients effectively, could I bring that 450,000 down to 300 even, which is higher than this was oncology, a biomarker trial, but it's still high on that end, but much more practical from a forecasting perspective.
Understand. So a follow-up question for that is, so there's opened up a lot of entrepreneur opportunities because of that, right? So so my second question is, if there is a startup who can provide that kind of solution, how much are you willing to pay? So that's my question.
Yeah, from a pharma company.
Yeah. Well, how are you going to value?
Okay, so I don't know the number, the dollar amount. That's going to be highly dependent. But what I will say is that, again, this is my opinion. Companies that are going more after platform sales. So like I want to get an enterprise license from a company for these type of innovative solutions are less likely to win than a company that comes in with a smaller dollar amount attached to a study. Because the reason being is because the product budgets, the asset budgets, have a lot more power than the IT budget. Every leader is going to put more dollars into the next oncology asset than they are into some kind of central IT solution. And so that's probably the way I would go. That's one piece. And the second piece is pay for performance. Most companies are driving, I want to see, prove to me that you can do what you said you're going to do before I pay you the full amount.
Yeah, you mentioned the focus on the assets, John. It's with a lot of the technologies, it's well, I'll let Tomasz, I'll let you, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I think those are some great points. There's a saying that you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose your job to someone using AI. I think that's probably a point here. But I think also the challenge with CROs, not my area of expertise, but I believe they have fairly narrow margins, right? So it also probably impacts their ability to innovate in this space. But that, it's just an opportunity for someone to come in and address it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
On the same vein, there are clinical AI recruitment companies in the market, but there are no company which can help in health equity recruitment. Could you see AI coming in picture in that segment, as you already mentioned, like even with so much difference, right, like 20 miles away from here, do you see AI can help us in that if there's any solution we can think of?
I had this idea actually, someone came up with that. I'm building a chatbot for clinicaltrials.gov so that patients would work. This is how do patients get into clinical trials with the provider, or they find the trial themselves, but probably mostly the provider at the end of the day. Build a chatbot for clinicaltrials.gov. Unfortunately, it wasn't being innovative enough to get funding for that, but someone out there will build it, and I think maybe that's an approach getting more consumer facing application. But the problem is, of course, how do you monetize it?
But Tomasz, it's an interesting idea because again, the monetization piece is an important piece, but it's an interesting idea though because that the population we're talking about, their healthcare practitioners probably don't know anything about clinical trials. So you're not going to get a lot of traction from that person to having a role. If you can get more content through chatbot or through other streaming mechanisms to those patients and those HCPs, that might be a win. Again, monetizing, I think it's a difficult one because they don't pay.
Okay. Question.
So these kind of platforms, big pharma is definitely going to make that using artificial intelligence, and they can use that for their clinical trials, but it cannot be affordable for the small pharma companies for their clinical trials. That's going to be the main problem. So probably NIH might have to get this platform, clinical trial .org, have to spend some money and make these platforms available for small companies, just like orphan drug platforms. That is the best way. Of course, big pharma is going to invest money and they will do it.
I think you also want to consider when these kind of technologies become applicable in the drug development process. And earlier on, when you're like, if you're an oncology company, you're named Cambridge, which you need to throw a stone, you're going to get 8 of them. They're probably not so concerned. They're concerned about how I get, the next 8 patients. They're not so concerned about, how to get 700 patients for registration. So they have a runway that brings them maybe to, the recommended phase 2 dose. And that's where their money stops. So they're going to have to get that broader influx of cash in. If we can partner with pharma companies at that point in time, from that perspective, I think there may be a little bit better opportunity to implement in the full development part of it. But again, your point's well taken. It creates an equity in pharma, but again, maybe it's not as impactful.
Okay, how are we doing on time? We have time for a few more? One more? Okay, one more question. Anyone have? Okay.
John, you spoke about alignment of incentives. So how do I, as a farmer leader, somebody who's been in the industry for 20, 30 years, I've never seen GenAI, I've never implemented a GenAI technology, filter through all of the noise when I see my competitor put in, let's say, $100 million in some GenAI initiative, and the next quarter I'm supposed to answer to my investors, what are you doing? Because we see your competitors investing. So how do you make a sustainable investment into all of these AI and DCT capabilities, whereas your shareholders are just pushing you for the next quarter return, whereas your oncology study could be running for decades? So how do you align those incentives? Is there a framework that these leaders are using these days?
I don't know if I know how to answer that question. That's a hard question. I think it's a very difficult question. I'm not so sure I can have a good answer for it, so I'm not going to BS my way through one.
I think we're going to have a whole session on change management coming up. So
That's a good challenge.
in future months.
Thank you.
But it's a great comment about like the inequities that we just talked about, over here in big pharma and small pharma. So maybe there's a way we can have some discussion on that.
I think just to add to that, thinking about the decision piece, if you are a company that's investing $100 million into Gen AI, for example, I think your investors are going to want to know what's the return on that going to be. Because you could be taking that $100 million and putting it into other clinical studies, getting other products out the door. So you're going to have that data, just as John was saying, show me the data up front in order to justify that investment, or someone else can come along if they're asked, why aren't you investing this right now? To say, well, we don't have the data.
Fair point.
I would say, and of course, I'm disclaimer, no idea here. But I would invest in compute, mostly because it's in shortage. And although it's a capital cost, so it's kind of, it's kind of move away from the traditional. But the thing about investing into compute, and especially on-prem, is that if you look at the stability AI, I think it's stability AI, behind the stable diffusion, they hit a wall because their compute spend basically outpaced their return on investment there, right? And they could have probably saved themselves a little bit, maybe, or at least prolonged their lifetime, if they, instead of buying compute on the cloud, had some internal resources. And I think that's maybe something that's defendable to the board or shareholders if you have, internal compute. Especially with all the people that, talks about Microsoft spending like $100 billion on the next supercomputer. Maybe this is the time to go longer.
Yeah, I agree. We'll finish there. I think, we've seen, a number of failures. Digital giants fail, Amazon fail. Well, they may disagree. Google failed, IBM Watson Health failed, Walgreens is closing half of the Village MDs. So, there's projections that all the rest of them will fail as well. CVS, Costco, Best Buy, anybody else getting into like healthcare or life science pharma space. So I think it's difficult to say how to position yourself in this, again, exponential growth when you're at an inflection point. How do you position yourself? But that's why we wanted this to be practical, realistic, rather than looking, okay, where am I going to invest? Future, what can I do? What endpoints? Where can I apply this? Where can I have the real world applications? Where can I have, where can I show the return on engagement, or be able to measure right now, rather than when there is no ROI because it's too early. So, how can we begin to implement some of these technologies? So I think we will end there. How's that? And we are moving to a group photo. So if everyone could please come up to the front of the stage and the stage. We'll move the chairs. And how's everyone? Yes, thank you very much. We'd love to